of a mental tug of war with myself, preparing this lesson as to how I wanted to address this parable because when I decided not to go whole hog and do it the way I was originally thinking, I will just tell you that I was thinking about once again just turning it over to you and seeing what kind of interpretations of the parable we would get. Uh, and then I thought that's probably a little unfair because this one is a little challenging in some specific ways. So I thought, well, probably better if we just go through and interpret it together like normal. I will try and draw your attention to a few things you should be looking at or thinking at as we go through it. But this is, of course, the parable, the persistent widow. At least that's what I've got it titled here. And begins there at the beginning of chapter 18. It says, "Now he was telling them a parable to show that at all times they ought to pray and not to lose heart, saying," and then I stopped and I put some of these questions on here. These are not questions about the text per se yet. They're questions about what you ought to be looking for when you're concerned about what is the correct interpretation. What is Jesus actually teaching us here? And so, of course, hopefully this surprises nobody. But the first thing I would ask is what is the context of this parable? One of the reasons why I feel this is a little challenging is because it doesn't come across in the English well uh, at the beginning there to make you justify a connection with the context. But in the Greek, you can see here that this is very much still a part of the dialogue he was having. And yet, uh, like I said, there just no help for the fact that when there is a chapter break, it tends to break our thoughts. But this is a chapter break. I won't say when be there, you got to put them in somewhere, obviously. But it's a chapter break that does cause people to disassociate from what Jesus has been saying. And the Greek makes it very clear here. Monty, I don't even remember the exact wording there. I just remember long ago that the Greek here makes it very clear that it's this same circumstance that he feels the need to tell this parable. So, what has been the context then, going back to uh, chapter 17 there? The second comment. Okay. Uh, I just put eschatology, that the end of time in my notes. Uh, but that is very much, if you remember, going all the way back, I think it was to verse 20 and 17, the Pharisees asked about when it was going to happen. And then following that, the disciples asked about where it was going to happen. And so we had those teachings with the examples of Noah and Lot that we looked at last class 2 weeks ago. I realize now, but and that was another thing I thought I should give you a break on when it has been 2 weeks since we were talking about these questions of theirs. But that's what's been happening. The conversation had moved to when was the kingdom going to come and when was Jesus going to come again. And Jesus had gone into that teaching, warning them about uh, what we tend to refer to as a apocalypse, those who are always, talking about, oh, it's, you can see it all coming together now, and it's going to be uh, on a certain day or going to be soon, things like that. Uh, so we've been talking about that, and it had been warning specifically, of course, then about the unexpected nature of his return. But as those conversations wore on, then you reach the point where Jesus feels the need to give this parable. Remember what I've always told you, that anytime there's a parable, It's there because as the master teacher, Jesus saw or recognized that he wasn't getting the level of understanding that his audience needed to have. And so he had to give an illustration, he had to give a parable to try and teach that. That leads to the next question. Who is the audience for this parable?
The same people that were the audience before.
Okay. It's pretty much the same people that it's that for the audience before. If you look at that verse one what we read, what is it telling you? Because it's telling you the audience.
People who might lose heart.
Okay, it's the disciples, and specifically, then that's the next question. What is the purpose? But the audience are his followers. So you're in that same situation where the Pharisees are there in the greater crowd, etc. But as he had addressed the last section to his disciples, this parable is for his disciples, and verse 1 helps you to see that. But the purpose of it is because he is concerned as the subject of eschatology, the end of time, the second coming, whatever term you like the most, you go ahead and use that. It's all the same. But as the conversation has been about that, he grows concerned that people, his followers, will get discouraged. What does that tell you? Sam, I told you, don't pass notes in class. We talked about this. What does it tell you that he feels the need to give such a parable for such a specific audience, those who may lose heart?
Because their faith is weak.
Why? Why though?
Because I think they saw the ending coming. They were audience to all the things that were going on with the Sadducees and Pharisees. Nope.
And is very short. We don't stay focused lots of time on things that are important. And I think maybe he recognized that this was such an important topic that he needed to reemphasize to the disciples the message that they needed a lot in life.
Okay.
Perseverance.
I'm gonna same thing. Do you have more you want to say there?
I mean, the very first verse says he was teaching the end purpose of this parable was that men always to pray and not to faint.
And not
Yes, the purpose.
yes, that's why we have the question here, because it gives it right there. But the need, you see, and you were touching a little bit, Patty was, Eddie's likewise. But the need is what you've got to focus on. There is a reason why when this subject comes up, Jesus is concerned that his followers may get discouraged. And the reason is the fact that they are going to be looking just like us. As we talked about 2 weeks ago, you have to live with the imminent return and have to be taught that way. But in reality, was it coming soon as men view things?
No.
How long has it been now? 2,000 years. For all I know, it may be another 2,000 years, another 10,000 years, maybe tonight. I don't know. You don't know. You see, but the concern is that when you are looking for something to happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, what's human nature?
Give up.
You give up and get discouraged. And so that is his concern. Some of the takeaways from this parable are going to fit that category that I've told you before, is that yes, it may be an accurate principle or indeed a true spiritual principle that people are taking away from it, but it's not the one Jesus is teaching. And that's what happens with this parable. Everyone takes this parable to mean one thing. And while that's true, it's not the purpose, it's not the main thrust. And so just keep those in mind as we go through. I did also do another thing to try and help you here. You may not have needed this, or it may not help y'all, but it always was something when I was young that uh, it helped me. So I put it in here. And that is to understand what both the New American 95 and the ESV tend to follow some of the older versions and use the term the elect. I wish they wouldn't do that. Both the ESV and my 95 have a footnote that tell you what it really ought to be. And every time I see one of those footnotes, I'm always like, why didn't you just put that in the text then? But no, you put it the way the older versions did, and then put the footnote. That, but it's really that word elect really means what? Chosen. Chosen. That is the Greek term. Chosen. And so this audience that he is addressing is the chosen. Yes, he has a larger audience that's going to hear it and everything, but his concern is for the chosen. And it's not just the chosen then, it's the chosen now. I put a couple of passages that maybe will help you. This is that great judgment scene pictured in Matthew 24. In verse 31, there it says, and he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect. That's chosen ones. Footnote, from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. And then this one in Revelation 17. These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. And take in all three of those words, because they're all three very significant when it comes to this parable. Right? He has the called, the chosen, and faithful. That's three characteristics, three descriptions of God's people. And all three of those terms are what this parable is going to be about. So, all right, let's see what he actually says in the parable. Verse 2. In a certain city, there was a judge who did not fear God and did not respect man. There was a widow in that city, and she kept coming to him, saying, give me legal protection from my opponent. So again, I'm just breaking it down real easy because I'm telling you, this is what I do when I'm going through trying to understand a passage. I get very basic the first few times through, and that helps keep you on the right path. So what is verse 2 telling us?
There's a judge who didn't care, period.
A certain judge, that judge does not fear God, that judge does not respect man. Right there in that description, what did you say, Ed? I said he's not a good man. Not a good man, not a good judge. Okay. Because of that, a lot of people immediately wall their mind off to a key point, which is this judge is going to be compared with who? God. But so many people put up a wall right here because they say, well, it can't be compared with God because this is a bad judge. It's just like the unjust manager, guys. It's the exact same thing. The comparison is between the two, but it's about the contrast. And keep that word in mind tonight. Contrast. Should just list a bunch of keywords on the board tonight. We'll work great. What is verse 3 telling us about the widow?
She was persistent.
Okay.
Consider their lethal cause with that judge day in, day out, this constant.
Okay. You're skipping the basics, but I understand. number one, she has an enemy. She has an adversary. She has an opponent. And she needs legal protection. Let's think for a minute about her situation. What is she?
She's been involved.
She's a widow. So what's her situation in that culture? A widow is the most vulnerable person in the Jewish culture of that time. That's why God says so much about taking care of the widows. A widow is the most vulnerable person in that society. So she does not have the political leverage to put any heat on this judge. She does not have the financial ability to persuade this judge the way things were usually done. We're about to see where we're at in Acts, where Felix will know, the Roman governor will know immediately that Paul is completely innocent and will also refuse to let him go until he gets a bribe. That's the way it worked, right?
Yeah, but this judge that she's appealing to was a judge that didn't fear God or man. So in all likelihood, being the type of judge that he was, the only way you would have gotten any kind of justice with him would have been through a bribe or some kind of significant influence.
Yes, she had to have a lever, and she just doesn't have one because she's this vulnerable person here. All right, let's move on to 4 and 5. For a while he was unwilling, but afterward he said to himself, even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will give her legal protection. Otherwise, by continually coming, she will wear me out. What's the only thing this widow can do?
Continue to bother her.
We can keep irritating the snot out of this judge. Yeah. The picture is that every day the court opens and she's there, and you can just see him every day just going, hoping at least she'd skip today. I put an asterisk by that phrase, wear me out, because this is another one of the things that I think would help people more often get it right if they understood that. That is literally to give a black eye to. And so it works just like our idiom still works today. So yes, it is an idiom. It doesn't mean she's punching him every time, but it does mean that she's giving him a reproach, a mark of shame. What's the problem when you walk around with a black eye?
Everybody wants to know what happened.
You see, and so she is giving him a black eye. So initially, how does he respond? Yeah, he's not. He's not going to do anything. Why should he bother himself? She has no position, no power, and no money.
What bothered me was, I wonder why this judge, being the type of judge that he is, why he would even be considered about having a black eye. I mean, that just kind of.
And some people do worry about that, but there is a difference in being concerned about your reputation than there is about just caring in general, and that seems to be the concept. I will say that some people prefer to take the idiom in the way of she's just wearing him down, but to me that does not fit the idiom as well. But that is the reason why the ones that go that way. Is they say, well, he doesn't care about men, so he doesn't care that he's going around with black eye. Yeah, he does, because he likes his standing, his prestige. And if a widow, it's just like if I'm going around with black eye and Ed says, what happened to you? And I say, well, I got in a fight with some 4-year-old. Yeah. what I look like. Well, first I look like a monster for fighting with a 4-year-old, but then I look like an incompetent fighter because a 4-year-old gave me a black eye. Here is a widow giving his reputation a black eye. Uh, what is the last half of verse 4?
He just repeats himself about what he said about how he doesn't care for anybody.
It is repetition. He whenever there is repetition, Jesus wants us to key in on that thought. He is not doing this out of any other motivation than that idiomatic black eye. That is the only reason he does this, and Jesus repeats it there for us. So how does he respond later?
Changes his mind.
He changes his mind after this money.
One quick point, Chris.
Sure.
The part that, he was continuously coming, and the Greek has the idea of, the judge looks at her and says, she's gonna keep on coming and pestering me until she doubts.
Every day you go.
Until she croaks.
Absolutely. All right, I think we got this one. All right, here is another key part here. And I won't give you the question until we've read it, but in fact, I'm trying not to sneeze. Give me. But in fact, we'll make a few comments, but then I will come back to just this first part of verse 6. And the Lord said, hear what the unrighteous judge said. Now will not God bring about justice for his elect who cry to him day and night, and will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will bring about justice for them quickly. So, who does the widow represent? Go back to purpose. Those who might lose heart. Why would the widow have been in danger of losing heart?
No other source.
Because she's been coming every day, and the answer has been what? No. So again, that is a foundational point to the parable. That here this widow is asking for the same thing of this powerful judge every day and getting told no every day. So you got to go back to the beginning when what was the purpose that Jesus himself says he's telling this for, so that his followers will not lose heart, or his followers will not faint. So we are the widow in the story.
Yes.
Who does the judge represent? Hopefully no one misses this after the introduction. Okay. He represents God. It is true, he represents him by contrast. It's an argument like we saw before, from the lesser to the greater. Which, by the way, the reason why you see that in the Bible so much is that was one of the Jewish, I'd say that was their favorite form of argument and defense, was to make a defense from the lesser to the greater. Sometimes they'd go from the greater to the lesser, but three-fourths of the time they did it this way. So here's that question. What is Christ's application?
Not to give up.
Verse 6, he says, and the Lord said, hear what the unrighteous judge said. And then in verse 7, in the first part of the 8, now will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry to him day and night, and will he delay long over them? I tell you that he'll bring about justice for them quickly. So what's Jesus's application? He's gonna keep, why? So that's the bigger part here. It's not just about persistence, it's about the motivation behind our persistence.
Chris, I'm not sure this is what you're exactly looking for, but
Adversaries. You know, that reminds me of Revelation, where
Yeah,
My souls are crying, how long?
yeah,
how
we're,
long?"
we're gonna look at that passage in a minute. Go ahead, Monty.
I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, but the fact that the widow didn't have an attorney or anyone to plead her case. And we've got Christ now that is there interceding for us and is pleading our case.
Okay. Well, again, that would be a true aspect, but that's not his focus here.
Yeah.
His focus is on just what he's saying. The reason why you be persistent is because why?
Looking for him to
You
take
will-
care of us, to avenge our enemies,
But why be persistent in that?
why are we persistent in it?
Yes.
Because he's the judge. He's the God.
Look at what Jesus said. It's not hard. You're overthinking it. Just look at what Jesus said. He tells you what the application is.
You'll find
God will do it. God will, that's the application. Now, it's about a specific type of answered prayer. And see, generally you hear this taught in just a general prayer truth, and that is an error. It's not that we're supposed to bug God to death for everything that we ever want. That's not the subject, that's not the context, and that's not the application he makes. It's specifically about that really the life of discipleship and those times that are so hard. And you got to remember in our last class, he was just telling them the day this is gonna be that you're gonna long to see that day. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about when we get so tired, as I think probably all of us do from time to time, of living in a world where injustice takes place constantly, constantly, and where persecution against those who try and live godly values takes place constantly. Yeah. And we have it much easier than some other generations obviously have had it. And yet we know that feeling, but you persist not just for persistence sake, but because God is going to accomplish what he set out to do. Let me read this passage that Rocky's talking about. This is the scene from Revelation chapter 6. When the Lamb broke the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word. Now look again, see it specifically who you're talking about. Is this all Christians? Nod your head this way. No. What specific group of Christians is this?
martyrs.
They're martyrs. They're ones who live their faith to the ultimate sacrifice. So, in other words, they're ones who have experienced the greatest injustice, right? And so they are under the altar, slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. And what are they doing? They cried out with a loud voice, saying, what?
How long?
Long. How long, O Lord, holy and true? You see the descriptive term. Will you refrain from what?
Judging.
And avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth. In the same way, we can say today, how long? We can say it in individual applications when we just want God's justice for this situation that we're in, etc. Or we can say it for the second coming period, you know. But the point is, and the focus of the entire parable, the reason why he gave it then and there was so that you never give up on God and you don't give up on God because he is not giving up on you. Now that leads to some other things. Let me get the rest of verse 8 in here first because it's very much a part of this, but if you don't split it apart, people make it the wrong applications. However, remember this is still Jesus talking. However, when the Son of Man comes, so obviously again, what was he talking about? He was talking about the coming of the Son of Man. Yeah. This this is why sometimes I have little patience with some of these commentators. Christ told you what the purpose was, they get the purpose wrong. Christ told you what the application was. They get the application wrong. Christ tells you what the event is he's talking about. They get that wrong. How can you miss all that? I don't know. But when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? What is the significance of that statement?
Well, we're told in the Hebrew letter that without faith, it is impossible to please God. For you must, number one, believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So you gotta be looking to God, you be talking to him, you gotta be working. I don't know if that helps.
If you're gonna find,
It's all closely related, but it's not the answer to the question.
when he comes again, is he gonna find the chosen, the elect, still pursuing, asking him that?
He is literally saying, you have to remain faithful to God until he comes. But God will be faithful. That's not the question. The question is not is God going see when we make this appeal, and I'm not saying it's wrong at all. He's telling us how vital it is to make it. Yeah. But when we make this appeal, what we need to remember is that God will keep his promise. He will bring about justice to everyone. But will we remain faithful until the end? That's the real question. And yes, I think it's fair to say that there is an indication there that when he comes again will be in a time when there is very little faith in the earth. Most people will have said, see, it wasn't true. He's never come, or he's not coming. Uh, I I think it's very fair to take that indication out of there. But the underlying point is just in your appeals, you put it as a question of is God going to do what he said he's going to do? And that is not the real question. The real question is not is God going to do what he said he'd do, but are we going to do what we said we would do? And that's why it's such an urgent lesson for Christians in all generations to recognize. And that's why I hesitate to even say this for being misunderstood, but I think it needs to be said. That's why it trivializes it some when you apply it to all of prayer, is because this is specifically about these circumstances. And when you try and make it to getting that promotion at work, you've just stretched it beyond what it was given. And miss the emphasis. Also, I may do a lesson on this one day soon, especially since we're getting late in this class in the timeline of Christ on the earth. But people love to say, pointing to the length of time, you see, in those last days, there'll be scoffers, as Peter says. And they love to say because of that, it's not true, he isn't coming, etc. And they love to talk about how the first and second generations of Christians thought that he would come in their time. First off, understanding the imminence of his coming explains that. But the statement that I hear all the time in Christian media, as well as just the critical academic world as a whole, is that the Bible taught and the apostles taught and believed that he was coming any day. I submit to you, the Bible does not teach that at all. The Bible definitely teaches that he would not come until after delay. And you've got a list. That's why I said I might do a lesson. You've got a list of passages on that.
There was an apostasy that had to take
Yeah,
before.
that's one of my favorites. Is Paul writing in the 60s said he wasn't coming back till first Paul was taken away, and that the church was going to fall away into apostasy. So I never thought that. How many parables did Jesus tell about a delay in the master's return? And that master said, that slave said to himself, "My master is not coming." You know, many passages show that in reality, the Bible taught there would be a delay. It's just that it's done so divinely with things like we talked about 2 weeks ago, intermingled to still keep the second coming thought imminent, even in their minds. But we should never get discouraged by. We were always told, when you really look at it, that there would be a delay, and the test is not of God; the test is of ourselves, and so that's what we need to remember.
There's a couple of scriptures that help me when I'm in trouble and when I get behind a little bit with my Christianity. For all of us, with little, pray without ceasing, that idea of praying. But Titus chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 specifically says that this is God's promise. He promises us eternal life, right? And he says God cannot lie. And when it says God cannot lie, when he's saying these things about he will, answer your question quickly, not like that worldly guy. But anyway, the thing is, knowing that he's not going to leave you, never leave you or forsake you, that gives courage to go on
That's
and
absolutely.
keep on praying. Don't worrying about losing out or something like that.
Yeah, and that's like I said, that's why he's been doing all this teaching, and then he looks at them, and of course he knows their heart, he knows what they're thinking, and he realizes that he needs to get this parable and the next. uh it's not lost either. Let me say, a lot of people struggle because Jesus says there at the end that he will come quickly. Well, number one, there are again 2 ways to translate that phrase, and the other one says that is that it would say God is patient with us. And if you got the uh, 95 here or the ESV, you'll have a footnote there saying alternately, our God will be patient with us. So there's a decision made there. It could go either way on that. But most of all, it is a failure to appreciate and understand the timeline of God. What's one of the passages I talk about all the time? Galatians 4:4, in the fullness of time. And we've talked about and seen in some of our studies all these different times God had to intervene in history, all the different things he had to bring about and work through, etc. But when the timeline gets to the church, if you have a divine timeline with all of these events, you have lots of dots, lots of events on that timeline until you get to the establishment of the church. And then you only have one thing on God's timeline after that. We're talking about prophetic timeline. The return. And that is why, I always say that's why we're in the last days, and it talks about the end of ages and all these type of things. But most of all, if you look, and I could, I can give you a lot of examples, but if you look at the way prophecies are described in the prophetic timeline overall, then there's no time between events uh, at all, you know, because there's nothing in between them. There's only time in between it. There is to be another event in between there. And as far as God's prophecy goes, there's not.
The sovereignty of God entails time itself. God determines time.
Yeah.
You know, we're just, I like the way you said it when one of your sermons. We're just a flip on the scene, you know,
Our lives are so brief.
you and I mean, we can read this Bible and we can fathom in our minds God's creating the world and Adam and Eve and Abraham and all of those things all through time through this book. But we're living in just a speck of that time. I mean, we're not even an idling of it, I think.
Yeah. Monty?
Chris, don't you think, one of the reasons why God delays answering our prayers sometimes is just because of this fact right here, that he wants us to get a proper view of who he is.
Well,
And therefore, when he comes, is he gonna find faith on do we?
yeah, certainly that. And it flew for me. I was going to say a parallel thought with it. Are aspects of waiting on the Lord, which is taught in and of itself. But just recognizing that, prophetically speaking, when there's no other event until the end of time, that means the end of time is tomorrow. That's why a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day. You know, we're always on the edge of it being tomorrow. And so that understanding is crucial. And one of the things that we so much lack in the modern church, that understanding that really and truly maybe in the morning is what helps you have the value system of God in a world that has such a different value system. You're not worried about your bank account if you know tomorrow the world ends. It's not going to matter. You're not worried about what your lawn looks like, or, you know, uh, you see, this is where our struggle comes in. But I think that as far as God's purposes in the delay, I think Peter tells us that very, very plainly. God is long suffering, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So he's given us time, but we need to realize that in reality, that is no time. You know,
There will be a time when his patience runs out, just like it did with Sodom and Gomorrah, Babylon.
and I suspect, and it's just
They just
my suspicion. One of the notes I made on this at the very beginning of my new study of it, for this class, was that again we see that we should, and this goes back to chapter 17 as well, but again we see we should never pay attention or waste time trying to figure out when and where our Lord is going to come again. And yet, how many religious leaders, that is the main focus of their teaching? Yeah.
William, Brother B. Howard had a whole series of lessons on the second coming, and he went back to William Miller back in the 1800s. He picked out a date, it came and went. Picked out another date, said he messed up, came and went. Picked out a third date,
Yes.
and it came and went. And he finally gave up.
But if you go back and look at that history, people believed him every time. People sold their possessions every time. And you're like, really, people?
They stole stuff, dressed themselves in white robes, got on the mountaintops and the housetops. I mean, they were so hook, line, and sinker on that stuff.
Yeah. We're about out of time. Certainly don't have enough to get in the next one like I wanted to, but let me say, I'll come to you in a minute. Let me, let me say that the next parable, while it's not unrelated, let me just put it like that. You always hear that, and I've done it myself because you only have so much time in a sermon and everything. But so you teach just the Pharisee and the publican, right? Yeah, that's your sermon or something, guys. But the reality is, it should not be broken out of the context either. It's a different teaching, but it's a different teaching concerning
This-
the justice of God. Yeah, that doesn't give that too much away. All right, Ed, you want to say something?
Helps me when I'm trying to work with people with this idea of time when he's coming and everything like this. Is I like to talk to them to the point where I say, okay, we talk about time and we're living in a timeline here, time and space. What happened in the beginning? It says God started time. He is above time. He is seeing everything in the future because he's above it, all the whole timeline, and he knows when it's going to end. He's the one that's going to, say it's time. That's the end of it. He started it, and we didn't get days, months, seasons, and years until the light was perfected in the fourth day, where he made the sun, the moon, and stars. He said, "Those will be for times and dates and seasons for you." So we are under this timeline. And there's a statement that I had on our refrigerator for a long time, I can remember. It states this: don't worry about tomorrow. God is already there. See, we're above time. He's above time. That's where he can be in every place at all at the same time. There's no
Yeah. All right, I appreciate your attention tonight, Eddie.
We all need to put our hands together because Patty retired today.
Oh, congratulations!
Finally get. The fish. I just want to make one statement, all those wonders for us to know what we're to do and what he expects of us. There's no more to be revealed. Now, we just have to live it.
Good point. Like I said, his timeline's been done since Acts chapter 2. And so it's all immediate from here. All right. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Lord willing, we'll see you Sunday.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July. We're 250 and